Welcome to another episode of As the Leader Grows. I have got a ridiculous treat for you. I get the opportunity to travel, speak all across the country, and I got to be with this guy, this next guest, for a weekend. We absolutely connected, and I know he's going to add so much value to you guys. Listen, welcome my good friend M2 The Rock, Michael Moulton, all the way from Dallas, Texas, motivational speaker, life coach, author, and as his t-shirt says, he's got his own I Am Second video. Michael, what's up, my friend?
What's up, Ken? Good to see you.
Man, it's good to see you, dude. Take a couple minutes and just kind of intro yourself to our audience. Tell us a little bit about where you're at, what you got going on, my friend.
Oh man, first of all, I'm so honored to be on your show and think the world of you. Really enjoyed our time together down in San Antonio and listening to you speak. And man, you got a mouthpiece. I
Come
mean,
on, bro.
you're a hard hitter, bar spitter, and I really loved it. Man, I just Google me. I don't mean that cocky. If you want to know who I am, but I am started my journey as a man in recovery from substance abuse disorder. And people say when they introduce me to speak, they say the real live Forrest Gump is about to come on stage. So apparently I have a crazy story, and we're turning it into a book as we're working on right now, 300 miles and a film. That we got a lot of stuff going on. So it's a good story, but the great thing is it's a story of redemption. It was a story of I shot a little video this morning, and I don't claim to be a religious robot, but I finally realized that after my 27th mugshot, I realized that God was all I had, but He was all I needed because He was all I had. And coming from a very high-end family, grew up in the upper class echelon, and also being successful financially myself, God removed everything away from me to get my full-blown attention.
I love it, dude. Man, for those of you guys that haven't heard his I Am Second video, I'm going to drop a link to that I Am Second video. It's about what, 9 minutes, 10 minutes long, Michael?
It's 9 minutes. And that has really opened a lot of doors. In fact, when they called
super
and reached
powerful.
out, yeah, thank you so much. And it's a nice snapshot of the story. And there's so much more coming.
So you're the only guy in the history of the world that I've ever heard of that was accidentally released
That's
from
right.
prison. Talk
Yeah.
about that. I mean, that story in and of itself is unbelievable. Talk about how you got in that position. Share with us some of the mistakes and some of the things that you learned and how you found yourself in position to be accidentally released from prison.
Well, it goes back, I was married for 14 years, and we had two boys, and I was very successful high-end luxury home builder in Dallas, in the Park Cities, Highland Park, University Park. And life was great. And then, on January 4th, 2009, my youngest son called me and said, Mom's on the floor flopping like a fish, and she had a massive brain hemorrhage. And from that day forward, my life has never been the same. And, through a very, very nasty divorce and families fighting against each other, I literally just gave up and gave them everything. And I went to a real dark place. And in 2010 or 11, I got my very first arrest and got pulled over and was intoxicated. And, as I said, had a large amount of cocaine in my truck. And, us addicts, we don't say we had a little, we always say large. And so I had a large amount of cocaine in my truck, and I got arrested for the first time in my life. And I arrived in a place that I said I would never go. And it scared me. And Ken, that day, I wasn't a believer. I wasn't into that stuff. And I didn't, one trauma I don't have is religious trauma. I didn't grow up, going to church and all that stuff. And so, I said, I'm never drinking alcohol or doing drugs again. And I really meant it. And, I didn't know how to bond out. It was this whole different world. And it was really crazy, Kim, because I'd see these guys get arrested and brought into booking, and the guards were calling them by name. They were calling them by their prison names. Like, hey man, what's up, Juice? You're back. And, what's up, Sketch? You're back. And I'm like, this is crazy. I said, I'm never doing this again. And I meant it, Ken. I really meant it. I said, I'm not drinking it again. Well, when I got back to, I was living in an apartment at the time because we were divorced, and I said, I just need to knock the edge off. And so I
Mm.
had one drink, and I got drunk and high again that night. 26 mug shots later, I finally realized on May 29th, 2017, I was apprehended by the Dallas Police Department. And if they would have let me out the next day, I would have got right back in the noise. I would
Wow.
have re-upped and did the deal. But I had no bond. And Judge Jennifer Bennett, who is, I call her my professional photographer, and she had enough and said, I'm gonna have to send you away for a while. And when I was in there, I had this and when they arrest you, they diagnose you. They put the misdemeanors together, they put the chomos together. Um, and then they have in Dallas, which is one of the most dangerous jails in the country, they have what's called the North Tower. And the second floor on the North Tower, they call it the jungle, and that's where all the murderers are. And it's maximum security. And that's where they put me.
Mm.
And they made a mistake, but they didn't. But they made a mistake and they put me in there, and I'm in a two-man tank. And I was there for 18 months until,
So dude, Shawshank Redemption is one of my favorite movies.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Favorite movies. What was it like the first night you're in there and they shut the door and turn the light out?
Well, they don't turn the lights out.
Oh,
That's one thing. But the first night there, um, well, which time?
no, when you got put in that North Tower and you're
Yeah,
there for the very first time and they shut the door and it's nighttime, it's time to go. What in the world was racing through your mind?
it's over. It's
Mm.
over. I'm going to prison for a long time, and I'd caught a charge for something that I didn't do that was later dropped, and I just gave up, and I'll never forget this, Ken. I'm laying there. I never had a visitor, never had, I have a very a strange relationship with my family, and I had a guest come in. It was my mom, and I walked
Mm.
in there, and she says, I'm just coming to say goodbye to you because I don't know when we're ever going to see you again, and I just said guard, and I got up and left.
Mm.
And as I did that, I walked back in, and this guy was leaving, and he just handed me a book, and it was this boring book, and I threw it on my bunk, and I was excited because my cellie, which is my cellmate, the bottom bunk was gone, so I got to move the bottom bunk, and that's a big deal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as I'm doing this old man's coming in. He was back on a bench warrant. They called him Ooh Wee. He was 70 years old doing life. So I had to give him the bottom bunk. Um, and the next day, he asked me to read to him this book I had. And I said, well, you can have it. He says, well, what's it say? And I said, Detours by Dr. Tony Evans. He said, oh, I love me some Dr. Tony Evans. That's a diesel. He says, will you read it to me? And I said, well, why? Which blew me away, being, upper class, educated, and all this stuff. He says, I can't read or write. And that just baffled me. So I said, all right. So I read to him. It kind of felt goofy for the first 10 minutes. And as I'm reading this, it's the story of Joseph. And I'm like going, man,
Mm.
this is my story.
Mm.
Um, and so he loved me reading to him. And I would read to him because we're locked up for 20 hours, in a
Mm.
4x9 cell, just him and me. Um, and the next thing I know, 4 days go by and I wasn't anxious. I wasn't
Mm.
nervous. I wasn't thinking about what was going on. And I realized that I was serving someone else and I was in the safest place in the world because serving him put me in the now. And that's where God's at. Um,
Mm.
and so as a result of that, I got, I caught chain, which means they transport you. And but before that, I'm reading to this tank because the whole tank can't read or write. And I have
Mm.
real unique handwriting. I think I sent it to you
Mhm. You
yesterday.
did,
I have
yeah.
unique handwriting and people loved it and they would ask me to write their names or write letters. And so every night at chow, dinner time, I would get up and I would read something out of the book Detours and how it affected me. I wasn't preaching. I was saying I statements. I said, man, check this out. And they loved it. And
Mm.
it provided hope in the tank. And the tank came closer together. And I'm the only white guy in there. They thought, when I went in there, I was proper. So they thought I was either gay or a cop. So I had to stick
Mm.
to myself. And I became tank boss, and the guards were just amazed. So they transported me to Central Texas, and I walk in, and they put me in another tank just like North Tower. It was rock and roll. I mean, Ken, I'm seeing guys get killed in front of me and all this stuff,
Mm.
and I'm sitting there, and this guy comes up to me, he goes, "Man, you got good handwriting. What are you reading?" I said, "Well, you
Mm.
can read it." He says, "I can't read or write." And so I looked at God and I said, "I see you, boo." I see you. And so I did the same thing there. And where my
Yeah.
awakening was, and my spiritual awakening was, is that um, I forgave everyone.
Mm.
And when I did that, God set the bond and he gave Christ the key and he literally put it in the lock. And on October 13th, 2017, they came over the speaker and they said, Michael Moulton, bunk and junk, which means get your bunk, get your stuff, you're free. And the whole tank's going, what's going on? And even the
Mm.
guards, I mean, I'm
What
not
what
supposed,
was
I
going
had
through your mind right then?
didn't know. I mean, I didn't know what was
Yeah.
going on because I still had another 2 years to serve.
Wow.
And so um, they literally had to physically push me out of prison. And that's for the first time when the gas of the world hit me. I just turned to God and I said, what do you want me to do? And he said, walk. So I
Mm.
made the journey 300 miles back to Judge Bennett's court. And she had heard what I've been doing in this transformation. And she said, I'm not going to get in the way. And she said, I'm going to set you free. And I
So
said,
hang on
I'm
a minute.
already.
Hang on a minute. Stop. You had 2 years left on your thing. 2 years left on your sentence. How long have you been in
Mhm.
at this time?
Oh, out of 6 years, I served 4 years. But I'd been in for like about 14 months.
So a little over a year. You get
Mhm.
released. Like I said, the only person that I've ever heard of accidentally released from
It
prison.
was the first time. It was the first time in Texas. And so, um,
And the first thing
they
you did
said,
was go get back in front of that judge. You went to turn yourself in.
yes.
Why?
Well, I walked to parole because I'd met my parole officer the day before and I walked straight into parole and I'm walking in. Her name is Stacy and she was walking, drinking coffee and she saw me come in. She goes, like, what are you doing here? And I said, I don't know. Y'all need to rearrest me. And they pulled up on the computer and, they said, man, it says you're set free. And they said that we can't do anything for you, but, they gave me some crackers um, and then I mean, everybody was gathered around. They didn't know what was going on. And then the head guy of probation came in. He says, you're not going to believe this, but I just looked on it. We got like $86 in a benevolence fund. And we can get you a bus ticket, but you got to get to Temple, Texas. So I had to walk, 75 to about 100 miles to get to
Wow.
Temple. And when I got there, I got on the bus and I said, well, I don't have any ID or anything. So they printed off one of my mug shots to pick up
Mm.
my ticket at will call. And I made it to court. And when I walked into court, Judge Bennett says, I've heard what's happening because people who had gotten released came back to her and
Mhm.
said this man had changed his life. And she says, I don't want to get in the way of that. And I'm gonna set you free and wipe your slate clean. Just go pay it forward.
Mm.
And that's what I'm doing right now, 7 years later.
So, dude, talk to me about that 100-mile walk. Like you're just, I mean, man, I can't even imagine the time, the quiet and the still. It's not like you've got an iPhone and some headphones. It's
Yep.
just you and God.
And I'm carrying my property, which is my Bible. And that was it, and some other stuff. And I'm walking just right down to Interstate 35. And I cut through and um, walked through a church parking lot to get to the bus station. There's these guys sitting on the back of their truck, and they saw me carrying my bag. It looked like a bag, and they said, "How you doing?" And they gave me $7. They gave me $7, and I went straight to McDonald's and got a Dr. Pepper and a cheeseburger. Oh
Come
my
on.
God, that tasted so good. So I get to the bus station, Ken, and I'm laying on the bench because my bus is not until the next morning. So I fall asleep on the bench, and the police come up and shine their lights on me. They said, "Are you okay? What's going on?" I said, "No, you need to arrest me. I mean, there's a problem." They call on their deal and call my number in, and they said, "We can't arrest you. There's nothing on your record." I'm
Oh,
like,
wow.
"This is crazy." And so I made it
When
to,
that
to
happened, Michael, did you not, were you like, okay, God, what are you doing? I mean, we read about and we hear about God parting the Red Sea for Moses. We
yeah,
hear Joseph's story and he's got this grandiose story. And then all of a sudden, he literally keeps Israel from starving to death. And then there are his brothers who literally sold him into slavery. We hear all these stories. Literally, God parted the Red Sea for you.
yeah.
He just said, I'm going to do something that has never been done before in the history of the state of Texas. And it's not like Texas. You heard Ron White. Some states have the death penalty. He says Texas got an express lane. Like they don't play. Like they do not
Texas
play.
don't play. They
No,
do not
and then
play.
here you are. God's just opening all these. Dude, what is going through your mind?
Well, I know it's all God because I'm this new believer, born again person. And I know there's something happening, and I'm literally following my feet. I know it's
Mm,
all God. Um, today, my goal today is not to influence others, is to help people see life today through God's perspective,
mm,
not their own. And so today I see it more through God's perspective of why he allowed all this stuff to happen, right?
mm.
Um, but I'm just following my feet, and I just know it's God. I'm just filled with the Spirit, and I just I didn't care what happened. I was just
So
like
did you?
going to the next deal.
So you had 75 miles to walk on an interstate in Texas,
And it's
like
hot.
one foot in front of the other. I mean, were you
Yeah.
just like with every step going, God, this is unbelievable? And then you get to
Yeah,
the bus station and you go arrest me, and they say you have no record.
that's right. That's right.
What are you thinking at the time?
I'm just thinking something biblical is happening. I'm like, this is crazy. But I believe it. I was
Mm,
believing what was happening.
mm,
And you know, all I was trying to do was get back and get to Judge Bennett and get rebooked in. I was dreading booking. Booking's horrible,
mm-hmm,
and to go complete my time. And when I went and saw her, I didn't say, "Hey, can we let this one slide and go?" I mean, I came to turn myself in,
mm,
and she's the one that set me free. And but as far as what I was thinking, it wasn't what I was thinking; it was what I was feeling, and
mm-hmm.
I was feeling the spirit, and I was following it.
So she let you go. Your record is wiped clean. You still have a lot of people in your past that you had hurt.
Oh yeah.
And now not only the people that you've hurt in your past, but you've got this really you're forgiven, you've got this new lease on life, you're have this new relationship with Jesus. You've got all these things going on. Walk me through what those first few months looked like being free.
It was it was faith. I mean, it was all faith. When I left the courthouse after, she blessed my game, um, I went straight to the Salvation Army and and slept on the floor. And when it was time to eat, I went into the cafeteria and I was bald like you because they shave you down, right?
Yeah.
And I'm horribly sunburned. It was the first time I'd seen the sun in a long, long time. And so I get to Salvation Army and I go to eat to the cafeteria. And, people in the cafeteria are volunteers, in
Mhm.
Dallas. And there were four women in there serving food that I had built their house, and they
Wow.
didn't even recognize me. Um, and so I was there, and I thought that I would call my dad. And I didn't have a good relationship with my mom and dad my whole life. And I went and checked on him because he was very sick. And this is really good. So, I get to him and he said, "Hey, I keep getting a phone call from this guy, Brian Glenn, who's this big radio talk show personality called Business in the Know, and they want to know where Michael Moulton went, this home builder." So I'm in Salvation Army clothes on my dad's driveway on his cell phone, and I call and they do an interview with me. They wanted to know, it's a business show. They wanted to know where this well-known home builder is gone. So I tell them the story of what I'm telling you. So on October 13th, 2017, I'm released. The following Friday, I'm doing this talk show interview with Brian Glenn on the deal, and I tell him the whole story, and he says, "Golly, this makes perfect sense. What year was this?" And I said, "Brian, this was Friday." And so it got out and the local media got a hold of it. And I was being, on the news, and then iHeartRadio called me in to do an interview. And then I started doing drive home traffic on radio with iHeartRadio, talking about doing a talk show on redemption and recovery and great stories. I did that for 2 years,
Mm,
um, being homeless,
mm.
and that's how it all started. And that's what we're still doing today.
Talk
I
about
didn't,
your
this is God's deal, Ken. I didn't sit in prison going, this is what I'm going to do.
I love it. Yeah.
you know?
You just Hebrews 11:1 says faith is a substance of things hoped for.
Yeah.
And I love your story, man. When I heard your story, well, when we met, when I spoke at the conference you and your wife were attending and spoke at, you had shared your I am second video. And so we'd hung out a little bit. The next morning, I go to the gym to lift and I'm watching your video
That's
and
right.
I'm like, I'm shouting, like, Come on, Jesus. I'm listening to your story like, this is unbelievable. I remember I texted you and I'm like, bro, I'm glad I'm the
Yeah.
only dude in the gym because I am shouting like ridiculously loud in here at your story.
Mm.
But I just
Yeah.
love the way that you just embraced the journey of faith because of the redemption and the forgiveness that you had found.
And that's correct. And back to a little snapshot of the story, Ken, I grew up with major trauma. I was sexually abused started as long as I remember from my grandfather, who was a cop. Behind closed doors, a lot of physical abuse with me. Um, but I was in a wealthy home, and so it was very hard for me. I couldn't share anything because no one would believe it because outside the home it looked so good. So I had real trauma as a kid growing up. And then I leaned on drugs and alcohol because when I drank and I did drugs, it made me feel like everybody around me looked, right?
Mm,
And so I would do more and more and more. And then I started creating self-inflicted trauma
mm.
on top of that. And hurting people, and doing those things. And so it was real trauma. And that's my mission today is to stop focusing on the addiction and to focus on the trauma, the pain, and the suffering. And Dr. Rob Kelly, who is a dear friend of both of
Yeah.
ours, I'm working intensely with him, on addressing the trauma because when we started writing the book, I went back to these places again, and it really started to affect me. But I wasn't resentful. I still forgave them, but I didn't
Mm.
know why it was affecting me and the things today that were triggering me. And I've learned so much through Dr. Rob Kelly, who is, just a beast.
He is pretty amazing. I've done a lot of therapy with him as well. He was one of my first guys that ever told me because of the trauma I had as a boy. Um, I can't tell you how many times he told me. He goes, Ken, the trauma that happened in your life and where you're at today is not your fault.
That's right.
The trauma that you experience and where you're at right now is not your fault. But now
Mhm.
that you know, it's your responsibility to do something with it,
That's right.
which
That's
is what
exactly
I've
right.
embraced. So you're doing all this stuff. Talk a little bit about, for those of you guys that may not understand or even know what I Am Second is, just a series of videos of pretty successful, um, highly known individuals who come to faith in Christ. Talk to me about this I Am Second video. Like, how did all that come about, man?
Well, it was a God deal. I mean, they reached out to us. And I didn't even know this, but their world headquarters is in Plano, Texas, right here in Dallas. And so, they reached out to us. Someone, said, "Hey, you ought to talk to Michael Moulton, into the Rock," and they brought me in, and we did the I Am Second film, and I was just honored because I'm like, why are they calling me? Because I mean, you look at the names on it. I mean, you got all these
Yeah.
celebrities, Brian Head Welch. I mean, you got
Mhm.
all the Duck Dynasty guys, and I mean everybody, Kathy Lee Gifford. I mean, they just released yesterday, Kathy Ireland, and I
Mhm.
mean, it's all celebrities, right?
Mhm.
And I'm like, why are they calling me? And so we went in there and we did the film.
Yeah.
And little did they know, they just celebrated an anniversary. They had I Am Second Day, and they invited me to be back, back on. Um, and in the last 2 years, the film they did on me is their most viewed film of all time.
That's crazy. I watched it, dude, and I
Yeah.
was blown away. You talk a lot about in the video you mentioned it because I didn't know this until I watched the video. You talked about just being molested by your grandfather
Yeah.
and being in that environment. Talk to me about how you made peace with that or forgave or what was that healing process and that journey. What did that look like for you, Michael? Because
That's a
that's a
great
it's
question.
a big deal.
I- I'm glad you asked that. You know, I had resentment and anger, towards him and what he did. And I didn't know why he would do something like that to me.
Mm,
And it affected me tremendously. I mean, I couldn't, I couldn't take showers and, I couldn't be in an open environment. I couldn't do sleepovers with other guys, and all the way down to a men's bathroom. I can't go to a wall urinal. I had to go in and shut the door. And I didn't realize these were all symptoms. I had so much shame.
mm,
And I had to realize, to forgive him, I had to accept the role that I played in it. And people go, wait a minute, you played a role in that? I sure did. And the role I played in it was I chose to hold on to the resentment.
Mm,
That's the role I played in it. And when I had my spiritual awakening while incarcerated, and I truly forgave everybody around me who really did me wrong, and I forgave them and I accepted the role I played in it, is where I was free. And I'll
mm,
give you a story for your viewers to and listeners to hear this, and this is a true story. I'm driving to a speaking event, and you can probably relate to this. I'm kind of locked. I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I've been speaking a lot, and I get in there and I go into the bathroom real quick before I'm going to speak. And there's two wall urinals. There's a guy using one, and there's a guy in the stall with the door shut. And I'm waiting for him to get out like I always do because I can't stand next to another man. And I go in there. So when I come out, they have this big white grease board, and I turn it around, and being a builder, I can draw. And I said, and I literally shared this experience that I'm still struggling with in the men's bathroom. So I draw the bathroom, and I did that. Afterwards, a man in the front row is crying, and he hugs me and he says, "You just changed my life because
mm.
I struggle with the same thing. Thank you." I go, "Wow, that's cool." I'm driving home, and it hit me. I go, "Wow, God is using my grandfather in that situation to work through me to help others who are suffering from sexual abuse. This is really cool." Now, here we go. 3 weeks later, I'm getting thousands of emails, thousands of emails. I'm like, what is it? And they're from people who are incarcerated. I'm like, what's going on here? They had just released all the iPads to every jail and every prison to inmates that they can, and it's censored, that they can go on and listen to podcasts. The man that was crying, his father is a bigwig at Securus Technologies, which is government communication for every jail, prison, White House, FBI
Mhm.
communication. And he put my show on every single tablet in every prison across the country so they could hear him to the rock. So this show we're doing right now will be
Yeah.
on every tablet in every prison as a result of forgiveness, as a result, and seeing it through God's perspective. See, if I wasn't a believer, I wouldn't have seen it that way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have seen it that way. What he did was wrong. Okay, what he did was
Right.
wrong.
Right.
But what am I going to do? What am I getting out of it, Ken, if I'm demonizing him all the time?
Dude,
That doesn't work.
I have 5 affirmations I write here every day in my planner that I created. And my second one is I am whole. I
Yeah,
choose to use past pain to help others find healing.
there you go.
So the
There you
pain
go.
that I've had in the past now has a purpose because I've identified it and the trauma and the things I went through. I'm going to take this past pain that I've experienced and I'm going to use it to help others find healing. And
That's right.
that's exactly what you've done. How does that talk to me about fulfillment? Talk to me about how you feel today. Like when I saw you and your fiance together, I'm like, dude, you love life at such a level and have such a passion for life right now because of where you've been. Dude, what is it like to be you right now and just live life and be like, dude, I can't wait to seize every single day.
Well, I'm human, and the gas of the world hits me. Listen, I'm real spiritual and real powerful when I'm doing this right
Right.
now. Okay. And the reason why is because I'm out of self and I feel like I'm helping others, and it puts me in the safest place in the world. And that's right here, right now.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm not thinking about the future or the past. Okay.
Mm.
But when I get alone, dude, I have my challenges just like
Yeah.
everyone
Yeah.
else. But I recognize it. I
Mhm.
recognize it. And how do I snap out of it? I just get back into service. Serve, serve,
Yeah.
serve. God's not interested in celebrities. He wants
You're right.
servants.
Yeah. You're right.
And so that's what I do today. And it's taken a lot of faith. There's days I'm going, man, I don't want to do this. I'll get back into home building, go make a bunch of money, and
Yeah.
uh
Yeah.
but but God makes it really bright and clear. He provides burning bush moments immediately. He goes, remember, I set you free.
Mm.
You're going to do it my way. I have a
Mm.
plan. I have a purpose for you, and this is what we're going to do. And
And you're
it's starting to pay
yeah.
off.
And you're like, okay, Jesus, I hear you, man. I know, I hear
And I
you.
live
I
in
get it, bro.
gratitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, I live in gratitude. And there's a lot of, every single day. Listen, I was telling Dr. Kelly this yesterday. If I really get out there and get squirrely, I go to my phone and I go look at my mug shots.
Mm.
I literally do that. I will go look at my mug shots and I go, okay, okay, I got you. I got you.
It's smart to be able to center yourself and just take yourself back to where you were and to look at how far God's brought you where
Right.
you are today. What would you say to
Right.
somebody today, Michael, that's holding or harboring unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment against someone, whether it be sexual abuse, whether it be physical abuse, mental and verbal abuse? What would you say to that person that's listening to this podcast today?
Well, we hear the cliche things like, stop drinking the poison, hoping they die,
Right.
pray every day for 2 straight weeks and it'll go away. No, none of that worked for me. Okay. Yeah, I prayed, please give them pancreatic cancer and help them die a slow death. You know what I mean? I mean, that's the kind of prayers that I
Yeah.
would do.
Yeah.
Uh, but I said it earlier is that true freedom is forgiveness. And, you know, once I accepted the role that I play in it, I
Mm-hmm.
played in it. Even my mom and dad, and I look back at the people who really did hurt me. I look back at the life that they had, the way they grew up,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and what they went through and what they
Yeah.
endured. And so that gives me a lot of freedom. Forgiveness is for me. It's not for
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm.
And move forward. So
Mm. I love that, man. Um, any last
resentment
thoughts?
is the number one offender, Ken. It's killing the human race.
Yeah,
That's it.
100%. I agree.
That's it.
And I think I love what you said. There's several times in scripture in the New Testament where it talks about forgiveness. But Jesus just said, listen, you've been forgiven of much, so you have to forgive much. Like anytime you put it back in the perspective of, man, I put Jesus on the cross. It was me that
Right.
drove those nails into
Right.
him. Like he suffered and died because he loves me. Every
Right.
year at my conference, we have these giant floor stickers with my quotes all over the building. Well, the first two
I saw
quotes,
those. That's really cool.
yeah, the first two quotes when you come in that you see is my quote: God's love for you isn't predicated on your performance. He loves you because he created you as a son or a daughter. And when
Yeah.
you can look at it that way, you see literally, instead of looking through the lens of religion, you get to look through the lens of the gospel, which means
There
good
you go.
news. Like, man,
That's right.
Jesus loved me so much that he gave
Right.
his life for me. And when you
Right.
understand that, and that forgiveness it comes alive in your heart, it doesn't make it super easy to be able to forgive other people, but you're like, man, I have to because of what he's forgiven me of.
Right. That's a good point. Sometimes when I say this, sometimes it stirs up some controversy, and I don't care. I'm not trying to be popular. I'm just trying to be
Yeah.
biblical.
Yeah.
And but when it comes to religion, I'm an agnostic. Okay.
Mm,
But when it comes to the word of God and the gospel and the truth, I'm all in. I
mm-hmm,
am all in. If I have to have choices of what I got to do, I'm gonna go to the penitentiary. And
mm-hmm.
so I stay
So
focused
good.
on the truth. And the way I carry myself today you'll never hear me say, okay, Ken, I'm gonna talk to you. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. Okay. I'm gonna talk to you. My red flags go off. It's like
Yeah.
Michael Jordan sitting down on the show saying, hey, I played in the NBA. We're going to go like, well, duh, we know. Why are you telling us that? I want to show the world who Christ is, not tell
So
them.
good.
I want to
So good.
show them. And that's the way that it works for me.
I love it, dude. Best way for people to connect with you, my friend.
Just go to our website, the letter M, the number two, the rock, ROCK, it's right behind me,
Yeah.
.com, M2 the rock, .com, and go follow us on all our social media platforms. And if you have anything that you need, and you can message us, and we have a nonprofit. And I'll plug, once again, in September
Come on.
15th this year, our book, 300 Miles, Krishanda Lee Perez is writing it. Um, and I didn't know this, but it makes me the author. So I get to say I'm an author. I haven't done nothing.
Isn't that
But
crazy? I'm the same
300
way. I'm like, I did what? I've done a book.
so 300 miles, and then there's opportunities. Do you want me to come speak? You can book me to
Yeah.
come speak and all that.
Well, guys, this story is absolutely unbelievable, dude. I love you like a brother. And man, I am
I love
just
you too. And hey,
honored.
stay tuned because you're coming on my show here in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah. We're going to have a blast, dude. I'm honored to be with you guys. M2 The Rock Show on Instagram. Get connected with this dude. This guy's story is unbelievable. And again, We will drop the I Am Second link inside of this description for you to be able to go check that video out because it is unbelievable. And let me say this to you guys. You're listening today and you're like, Ken, I'm just not really sure where I fall when it falls on which side of I fall on when it comes to my faith. Let me say, number one, it's completely okay. God is not too big for your questions. He's not too big for your anger. He's not too like, listen, Jesus hung on the cross and looked at heaven. It's recorded in scripture in two different places. God, why have you forsaken me? God's not too big for you to go, God, why? I don't understand. And I know Michael understands this and I understand this. And listen, God's love for you, regardless of who you are, is not predicated on your performance. It's not about jumping through a hoop or doing A, B, C, or D. That's religion. If you could be made right with God by doing the right things, Jesus would not have sacrificed his life and done what he did for you. So, Michael, dude, I love you, bro.
My man, that was
Thanks for coming
beautiful. I
on.
love you too. And thank you so much for this.
I appreciate it. Guys, thank you for joining us on another episode of As the Leader Grows. And as always, come check us out over on our private Facebook community, Grow Stack Drive. Hit the like, subscribe button. Go check out my guy, Michael Molthan. And we'll see you next time on As the Leader Grows.